Thank you a lot for taking your time to join this playful event. And I would like to also thank Yu-kai Chou today for giving us the inspiring presentation. And I believe everybody has already know Yu-kai Chou a lot from the book, from the TED Talk, from the Octalysis platform he's building. It will take me forever if I'm going to introduce Yu-kai to you. So I would leave it to you, Yu-kai Chou, and could you please introduce yourself and then kickstart our talk today?
Yes, absolutely. Again, thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure. And to start, I mean, I'm a pioneer in the world of gamification behavioral design. I actually started my journey in gamification in 2003, so a little more than 20 years ago now. So it made me a early pioneer in the industry. I'm not saying I'm the first person, but there's small communities of people who had their own independent journeys. I'm one of them. And so I got to a point where I utilize this thing called the Octalysis Framework, and I have empowered over 1.5 billion user experiences through a lot of my work with my clients. So I teach, but I also practice with design and work with a lot of clients. I regularly share what I'm going to share today at places like Stanford, Yale, Harvard, Oxford, Google, Tesla, IDEO, a variety of places. And I was rated the #1 gamification guru in the world out of a list of top 100 gamification gurus. 3 out of 4 years. So 1 year, I think I was #2, and later they made me a judge. So I became disqualified to be a guru on the subject. And here's a variety of companies I have worked with help with. And one big misconception is that, Yu-kai works with gamification, so he must work with a lot of gaming companies. But usually the sweet spot of gamification are things that are very, very important, but potentially mundane or boring or even intimidating. Things like healthcare, education, finance, insurance. Occasionally you have things that are very, very competitive, like retail or e-commerce, where you just need to differentiate and stand out through some unique means. But the key is that we want to make important things more enjoyable, not make even more games out there so people have this escapism fantasy world, right? We want to make our world better, not better alternative worlds. Wrote a book called Actionable Gamification. If you like to talk, you want to learn more, you can go to yukaicchow.com/books. And sold a little over 100,000 copies. And didn't really do much of a book tour promotion because I was behind my entrepreneurial work. Once I finished it, I just put it on Amazon, and it did pretty well. And uniquely, this is the first time I shared. It's not even a real slide because I threw it together really quickly. I just finished the manuscript of my second book last week, and the second book is called 10,000 Hours of Play, which is about breaking life into 6 steps and turning life into a game. So whether it's finding the game you're playing your life, finding your talents and attributes, knowing your role in this game, enhancing your skills, meeting the right people, building alliances, and achieving your quest. So that's something that I'm quite passionate about. And obviously this deals with, personal development, education, growth. And I think everyone can have a much better life through this process. So hopefully we'll have this published in 3 to 6 months, because as you know, writing all the words is still just an initial step of having things launched. Here are some quotes that people have about my work. I'm not going to read through them, but see that VP at Google Experiences, or partner at IDEO, and a famous author of the book Hooked. They all have good things to say about some of my work here. And for those who don't like to learn about how to make things fun through reading a book, I'm sure most of you are fine with reading because you're in this field of intensive academia, acquiring knowledge, but I have lots of audience who don't like to read that many books. So I have a gamified island to learn about gamification. And so I've made over 1,200 videos on it, about 10 minutes each, about gamification, motivational psychology, behavioral economics, all those things. It's kind of like downloading my brain. And we have what we call a daily active user over a monthly active user of 38%, which means that if someone comes on this island once a month, they kind of care. There's 38% of them come basically every single day. So, they are kind of engaged. All right. So I'm going to start at a high level, but quickly zone into the topic of today. So this is something called the digital convergence model. It's something I first shared in a conference at Harvard University, I think in April of last year. And then later I presented this to the president of Kazakhstan, and I talked about three pillars and a roof, right? Three pillars is metaverse, that stands for immersion, Web3 that stands for value, gamification that stands for engagement, and then artificial intelligence that stands for automation, and it scales these three things immensely. So the key is that if you just have two out of the three, you'll also, especially if you have, for instance, a metaverse with Web3 values, but no engagement, such as if you heard about Decentraland, where it's a metaverse where people can own land and companies spend millions or tens of millions of dollars on it. The value is in the tens of billions of dollars, but then they saw that there was only 16 people using it at one time because there's nothing really to do there. There's no engagement. And suddenly the value of it plummeted because people realized, well, how could it be worth billions of dollars if no one really is using it? So this is something that is interesting to explore at one point, but today we're really going to hone in more on the topic of gamification, which is the engagement piece. And so very quickly, what is gamification? It's applying game design to things that are not game context related. So again, things you don't want to do, but you kind of have to do, and we want to make that fun and enjoyable. By the way, I'll go through some slides pretty quickly because we have a lot to cover. And I really loved everyone's intro and where you're at, but we also lose a few minutes, so I'm going to go through a lot. So hopefully we'll have more time for your questions. But there's a lot of very exciting things I want to at least share. So, and later on you can say, hey, Yu-kai, that thing you showed, you showed very quickly. Can we double down on that? Can you explain a little bit more? So we can wait for a Q&A on that. So I believe the core of gamification is what we call human-focused design, as opposed to function-focused design. So most systems are function-focused. They assume that people in the system will do the desired behavior, and you optimize for efficiency, for usability, for ergonomics. So it's a bit like a factory, right? You assume they'll do their work because you pay them, and then you figure out how to maximize your production and your efficiency and safety. But human-focused design remembers that people in system have feelings, they have motivations, they have insecurities, they have reasons why they do or do not want to do something, and then optimize for that. So that's a bit more like a theme park where you design it to be really fun, and you can predict that people automatically line up for hours and hours to enjoy that experience. And what's unique here is that in the case of a factory, you're paying them to do relatively mundane work of factory life. But in the case of a theme park, they're actually paying you to stand in line for hours and hours just so they can enjoy those few minutes of fun. Now, the reason why we call this gamification is that I believe the gaming industry is the first to master human-focused design, because there's no real purpose to playing a game, right? You never have to play a game. You have to do your training, pay your taxes, take your pills. If you don't like it, you just have to persevere and push through. But again, for a game, you never have to play a game. The moment a game is no longer fun, you play another game. You check out your email, you go to YouTube. So because games have spent decades or even centuries, depending on how you qualify a game, getting people to come back for sometimes 6, 7, 8 hours a day, do repetitive actions like throwing out a bird, throwing out a bird, throwing out a bird, or matching 3 gems, matching 3 gems, matching 3 gems. We're now learning from that discipline, and that's what we call it gamification. So here I introduce what I'm most known for. It's called the Octalysis Framework. It's called Octalysis because it's a combination between the word octagon and analysis. And so this came from a deep study about, okay, why are games engaging and why are some games not engaging? And I like to study games that are very similar to each other. Sometimes they're just clones, copycats of each other, but somehow one is very successful and the other's a failure. And I noticed two things. Number one, it's not because one game has game elements and the other doesn't, right? They're copycats, so they both have these points, badges, leveling up, treasure boss, Easter eggs, whatever you have in the game. But again, one is successful, one's a failure. It's also not because of the graphics. Sometimes the visually stunning game is a huge failure, but the relatively ugly, low-resolution game like Minecraft or RuneScape becomes very, very successful. And so at the end of the day, I realized that all the successful games have now what I call the 8 core drives of human motivation. And then from that, we derive a variety of game design techniques. So these design game techniques or game mechanics, they are not exhaustive. They're just the example list. But the key is that, you know, they're there to bring out these 8-core drives. So what's unique about these 8-core drives is that everything we do in life is based on one or more of these 8-core drives, which means that if there's none of these 8-core drives there, there's zero motivation, no behavior happens. So you, as long as you can say, hey, this person is doing X, you can say they're doing it for at least one of these core drives. If none of these core drives that are there, you know, your students are not studying, your professors are not teaching, I'm not here, your customers are not buying, coworkers are not working. So nothing happens without these 8-core drives. Even the activity of eating, if you're eating to avoid starvation or feeling hungry, that's loss and avoidance. But most people don't eat because they're avoiding starvation or just the feeling of hunger. They do it socially. Sometimes they're just bored. So unpredictability, they're just looking at what's in the fridge. Sometimes they're eating scarce food. So they think it's like, oh, this is very high end, so I have to try it out. So, but without these 8-core drives, we basically don't even eat food, and we perish because of that. And so when I first created the framework in 2012, I just wanted a tool to solve problems. I didn't have much ambition or potentially even confidence in the academia world, but you know, this year when you search for the Octalysis in Google Scholar, you'll see about 2,600, I think closer to 3,000 now, PhD thesis, academic journals referencing my framework to things like, for instance, the evaluation of student core drives on e-learning during COVID-19, or quality management systems, role-playing in simulations, and variety of things. So I've just been very, very lucky and blessed that, you know, this tool that I just was intellectually curious about and I created still stands pretty strongly today in both the commercial and academic world. So we're going to go through these 8-core drives, and I'm going to show a couple examples about them, and then we're going to look at the different natures of these core drives. Some are what we call white hat motivation core drives. It makes people feel powerful, in control, and they feel good, but there's no sense of urgency, so they procrastinate. And then some, we call them black hat motivation core drives that make people feel urgent, obsessed, and sometimes addicted. But in the long run, it could leave a bad taste in people's mouths because they feel like they're not in control of their own behavior. And then we're going to look at the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic core drives. So core drive 1 is epic meaning and calling. It's a drive that says we're motivated because we feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And this is, for instance, why people contribute to Wikipedia every day after work. We know that people don't do it to make money, but they don't even do it to upgrade their resumes and advance their careers. A lot of people, again, every day after work, spend a few hours updating the insect section or the semicolons because they believe they're protecting humanity's knowledge, something bigger than themselves. And you'll see this theme in games a lot, right? In games, they'll say, hey, the world's about to end, but somehow you're the only person qualified to save the world. And then you feel very driven, engaged. I got to do it. If not me, then who? And so you tackle that. So one example is this company called Ocean Hero, which is a client of ours. And they are a search engine, right? So again, very function focused, you think. Search engine, just find the answers as quickly as possible. But they have an epic meaning and calling angle, which is basically saying, when you search on Ocean Hero, as opposed to other places like Google, instead of getting ad money, they will have someone pick up a plastic bottle from the ocean. So now you feel like, hey, I'm just searching for information anywhere, but here I'm saving the world and making the world a better place, and you feel like a hero, right? So when I first started working with them, I think it was about 2-3 million bottles picked up from the ocean, and last time I checked, it's like 89 million bottles now. So they made searching online impactful, and I believe 89 million bottles removed from the ocean does make a decent impact to the ecology system. Here's another example in the mobile app scenario where this is an app called Full Dive, and they're a mobile app where you browse around, and then you also get different points, and then these points allow you to get rewards like gift cards, whatnot. And this you'll see a lot because conceptual, a lot of people will feel like, wow, I just do these easy things, like I browse and shop or whatever, and I'll get some points that's worth money. Conceptually, people will sign up, but what you'll realize is most of the time the economy design is not very strong. And so people feel like, oh, after a whole month of using this, they'll get like $4 or something. And they feel like, wow, that my time is like totally not worth it. Every time I do something, it's less than 0.1 cents. So what we advise them on, alongside many other things, is, hey, why don't you allow your users to instead of just get $4 gift card, say, hey, you can donate it so that 20 kids don't have to starve tonight, right? Because it turns out to be relatively cheap to feed a starving child. And so now people feel like, oh wow, I am making a difference in this. So you'll see commercially, they talked about their app rating increase from 4.1 to 4.7 stars. The downloads increased from 600,000 to 2.7 million. So this is not a super niche app. There's a sizable amount of people using it. And their weekly intent retention increased from 12% to 29%. So a lot more people want to use it every week now, because of some other game core drives that we have, but Epic Meaning Calling played a role too. Core drive 2 is development accomplishment. So this is the drive that says we feel like we're improving, we're leveling up, we're achieving mastery. And so this is where most of the points and badges you might have heard of in gamification fall into. Points are just mathematical counters. It shows a sense of progression. So even though you're doing the same things over and over and over again, at least you see this number getting bigger and bigger, this progress bar moving forward. So you feel like you're getting somewhere. And so for some people, that's like their work. Hey, every day I do the same work repeatedly, but hey, at least I see my bank account growing bigger and bigger, and that makes me happy. Badges are what we call achievement symbols, and it symbolizes a sense of accomplishment. And achievement symbols can be many different forms. Could be badges, trophies, uniform changes, white belt, black belt in martial art, and that has lent itself into quality management with Six Sigma. But the key is that it must symbolize an accomplishment. If you give people a badge for every silly thing they do, then it's just an icon, right? It doesn't really mean, you have to build meaning into it. It's like the difference between winning a chess tournament and getting a trophy, or just going to a store and buying a trophy and putting your name on it, right? Very different in terms of what it actually symbolizes. And so we know this is a very popular mechanism in Core Drive in the education space. And Khan Academy, they'll show a variety of skill trees about how you're growing and how your skills lead to other skills, etc. Duolingo also heavily utilizes these types of mechanics to feel like, hey, you're growing today, you're close to leveling up, accumulating your points, and a lot of people do feel like it gives them this nudge forward to improve. And we know that stars never get old. Throughout, how giving little kids stars in class has been used long time ago. Some people say that, oh, gamification is a technology trend. And not really. It's more of a design philosophy based on human psychology. And so we know kids are really engaged when they see they're getting more and more in stars, which becomes badges for adults and other things. But it's obviously utilized in many different fields that engage people. Core Drive 3 is empowerment of creativity and feedback. So this is basically like Lego. You give users the basic building blocks, and there's an infinite amount of ways for them to utilize their creativity, try different strategies, see feedback, and then adjust based on that. So this Core Drive deals with things like creativity, meaningful choices, strategy, autonomy, things like that. Later on, you'll see that this is on the right top of the octagon, which means it's what we call a white hat, right brain intrinsic core drive. So it usually has the longest lasting type of motivation. It has what we call evergreen mechanics to it. So every timeless game in the world, doesn't matter if it's chess, poker, mahjong, golf, it has this core drive. Whereas there are some games that that rely on the core drives. The moment they stop doing the weekly updates, new heroes, new maps, people stop playing. But if you have Core Drive 3, empowerment of creativity and feedback, then it's usually evergreen and people enjoy that a lot. And which in today's talk, we talk a little bit about creativity. So obviously it has this name here. So it's one of the core drives that we would like to focus more on in the future. And this also has a lot of good implications in education. So if you look at Kids who play card games like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or whatnot, there's a lot of cards, sometimes over 1,000 cards, and each card has 2 to 4 different numbers and stats, like your health and defense and special effects. And the kids who play this game well not only memorize all the cards and the stats, but they memorize things like your card counters my card, counters his card. And if you think about it, that's actually more information than the periodic table. It's like these kids memorized every single element, the exact placement of the element, the exact weight, and how every element interacts with each other. So there'd be like, for instance, like, oh, well, if you put the carbon together this way, then it's like that it's coal. But if you switch the order around, then it's a diamond, and it's a very powerful combination, right? And so it's like brilliant, right? These kids are geniuses. But then when you ask these the same kids, so what is the fourth element? They'll be like, oh, I don't know, nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, have no idea. And it's not that these kids suddenly went from being genius to idiots. It's a change in motivation, right? When they are playing these card games, they're just trying to get an acceptable grade, not upset their parents. And it doesn't matter if you're A student, B student, or C student. You study hard enough just to reach your acceptable grade, and then you stop, and then you probably go and play games. But when you are playing these card games, every card allows you to become more powerful, utilize more strategies, and beat your friends. So if as a means to an end, you need to memorize a lot of information, that's not torture at all. That's not just tolerable, it's actually enjoyable. You know, people really like that, and they'll say, hey, look, this is a fire type, it counters this, and this is a dragon type. And then you look at them, it's like, wait, how do you know all of them and still get a C in class, right? It doesn't make any sense. And so I work with a lot of companies where they'll tell me, you know, potentially their employees are not, you know, very highly educated, maybe a lot of blue collar workers, and they don't have the mental capacity to memorize the operation manual or the menu or insurance policies. But again, from my experience, almost in all cases, it's a challenge in motivation, not intelligence. These people, they go home, they watch sports, and they remember a lot of the stats of the players and all that stuff. So the key is to make it fun. Now, Google did something very interesting in the early days. The Google founders decided that every Google employee is either an entrepreneur or wants to be an entrepreneur. So just because they get paid doesn't mean they're going to work there. So they wanted to think about how to create a more enjoyable environment that they themselves would want to work at. So they did a few things. They also did epic meaning and calling, right? They said Google does 2 things. One, it organizes the world's information, and 2, it does no evil, right? And a lot of engineers, they think, okay, I can get a paycheck anywhere in the world, but at Google, I feel like I am changing the world, and I'm one of the good guys. So that's very important. And for development accomplishment, Core Drive 2, Google said, well, you know, there's multiple levels of engineers because not every engineer could become a manager, but now you can go from a level 3 engineer to a level 4 and to a level 5 engineer. You still feel progression in life. And then for empowerment of creative feedback, Google said, well, you know, we have this thing called 20% time. And so one day of the week, you can work on anything you want as long as the IP belongs to Google, right? And so a lot of these quote unquote entrepreneurs like, oh, it's so much work to go out and start my own company. Why don't I just do it in the comfort and the benefits brand of Google? And but allows them to express their creativity because a lot of people are stuck in corporate environments feeling like they're always doing the same thing and what they do does not make an impact or doesn't matter. So because of this 20% time, actually a lot of employees who would have went out to did their own thing stayed at Google, and half of all the Google products that launched at the time came out of this 20% time, including successful products we use today, you know, Google News and Gmail, whatnot. So it's a good use of that creative work environment. Core Drive 4 is ownership and possession. So this is basically saying because we feel like we own something, we want to improve it, we want to protect it, and we want to get more of it. And so this deals with virtual goods and currencies. It's the drive that makes us want to collect baseball cards and stamps, for instance, and also has this more abstract view of, let's say, you invest a lot of your time to customize your LinkedIn profile, your Dropbox folders, or your Facebook profile. And so you have more attachment, hence ownership over that experience. So even if a new technology comes out that's supposed to be better and smarter, we don't want to switch because that doesn't understand me. This one does. This one is my system. And this is obviously can tell it's like a Monopoly related game that UBS, the bank, made to help India with kids' financial literacy. And so little kids, and they're usually lower than fourth grade, they're playing these games, and it's about running a local store, understanding the financial economics and loan structure. And it actually covers a lot of things that you wouldn't imagine at the beginning with a kid's kind of little game, because it teaches about banking, credit, debts, loan, insurance, taxes, and all that stuff. And there are kids who say like they play this game and it's so much fun, they enjoyed it, and then they suddenly learn that, oh wow, like when they look at what their parents are doing or look at the store, they start to understand how it works. Like, wow, this is actually what the grown-ups are doing, actually the same as what I've learned in the game. And now I've actually had these skills that school, even in the West, like the US, right? A lot of times schools aren't teaching a lot of these and how to deal with loans and think about taxes and insurance, right? So it, we talked about the equity aspect. I think if you make all the regions more financial literal, have higher financial literacy, and you make it fun and kids grow up understanding how to manage money, how to manage a business, I think you'll also have more equity in the world because everyone will be in the same playing field, no pun intended, with opportunities. Again, this is Octalysis Prime. And the goal is to get people to come back regularly and learn about gamification and whatnot. And so every time someone goes on this island, they'll notice that one special thing might appear. And obviously everything looks new here for you, but in this case, it's on the top. It's like a little wolf on the top. So then if you click on the wolf, you go to that section, and then it'll ask you a gamification question. So if you get it correctly, you will capture this pet, and then it'll go into your Geomon album. But if you get the question wrong, then it runs away. So a lot of people are studying hard to make sure they can get the question correctly when it does appear. I had one of our OP members, Octalysis Prime members. He said that he once stumbled upon a mystical Geomon, which has the leprechaun, which has a 1% chance of showing whenever you come back to the island on a daily basis. And he got the question wrong, so the leprechaun ran away, and it scarred him for 2 years. He got really upset. It's like, I have to study this gamification stuff more because I never want to miss another question again. Over the years, he did capture a few more mystical Geomons, maybe even one legendary, which is like 0.2% chance. But he still always remembers the first one that ran away. And then each of these Geomons become your collection, and it teaches you one of those game design techniques that I shared. And so, like I said, we have a 38% daily active user, monthly active user. The golden standard, I think it's Netflix at 42%. But as you know, Netflix is all about addictive cliffhangers and drama, where this is just watching my face teach about gamification every day. So I'm happy to be a little bit lower than that. We actually have an interesting story where one time a OP member came to me and she said, "Hey, Yu-kai, I think the leveling up system is a bit broken." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Tell me about it. Why?" And she said, "Well, because I feel like I'm leveling up too quickly. I'm already silver status on the island, and I'm not even one of the hardcore members." And I said, "Okay, interesting. Okay, let me ask you then. Let's figure this out. When did you sign up to Octalysis Prime?" And she said, maybe like 15, 16 months ago." And I said, "Okay, and how often do you come onto the platform?" And she's like, well, first of all, I'll come on every day to open the treasure chest and to capture the Geomons. And then sometimes I'll also come to, and I said, "Oh, wait. You've been coming onto octalysisprime.com for every single day for 16 months straight." And she's like, "Yeah, pretty much." And I'm like, "And you think you're leveling up too quickly? Not one of the hardcore people." "Yeah, I guess, because there are way more hardcore people than me on the island." So if you don't know, which you probably don't, there's 6 statuses. So it's blue, orange, purple, silver, gold, and black. So she's 4 out of 6. So I'm like, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy where you are. I think the economy is not broken. But you can see that when you make collecting fun, people want to come back a lot and do these activities. Core Drive 5 is social influence and relatedness. So this is everything you do based on what other people do, think, or say. So this deals with things like group quests, competition, collaboration, gifting. It also has this relatedness piece, which deals with things like nostalgia. You know, if you see a product that reminds you of your childhood, you have a higher chance of buying the product. If you meet someone from the same hometown, let's say you're working abroad, you have a higher chance of striking a deal with that person. And one of the powerful things in Core Drive 5 is social norming. And this is an example called O Power, where they wanted people to use less energy. And they tried, they try to use a lot of different messages like, hey, this is how much money you would save if you consume less energy. And people think, oh, yeah, I have to save some money. Let me use less energy. But they don't change their behavior. And when it says like, oh, you need to protect the planet, so you should try to use less energy. People's like, oh, yeah, I should do something about the planet, but then they don't change their behavior. And what they saw work really well was when they just show an interface that says, hey, look, this is where you're at, this is where your average neighbor's at, and this is where your best neighbors are at. And when people realize like, oh, wow, I know I'm not some world-changing savior, but how can I be worse than Bob down the street, right? That makes no sense. They all change their behavior. And through that, in a couple of years, they saved $200 million worth of utility bills, which again is very, very impactful. This is actually an interesting project we did for Naval Orbital, which is the largest distributor for Procter & Gamble in Eastern Europe. Some of you might realize this is in the Eastern Europe region with Portugal and whatnot. And so what they do is they are trying to motivate their salespeople to become more driven, right? And what their salespeople do is they go door to door on retail stores and say, hey, would you like to restock up on your Procter & Gamble products? And one of the biggest problems they saw was that they didn't the salespeople, they saw each other as their biggest competitors, so they didn't want to help each other. They wanted to kind of sabotage each other and get ahead. So we created a kind of like a fantasy app for them to go around and do selling. So if you don't do your job, you can't actually play this game. And it pretends that people are this 14th century trade merchant going around, and as they go to stores, they will actually show a ship on a map, travel to different places and doing trades. And everyone has two stats, their health and their wealth. So their health is based on their KPI activities, so basically pitching a lot, and their wealth is based on closed deals. But most importantly, in this example with social influence, is that they have a common town that they share, and there's also city health and city wealth. So at the beginning, it doesn't have much, but as all the salespeople do their work and close deals, the town remains healthy, and they'll build up wealth to build different buildings and structures and better infrastructure, things like that, facilities. And so now people start caring about helping each other because they feel like they want to build the city together and they want to get more progress. So the case study here was that their KPI activities went up by 59%, and their sales revenue went up by 28.5%. Social interaction was a little hard to measure, but the company said based on people now interacting with a lot and helping each other, giving advice, it went up by 300%. And so this one won Best Gamification Project Award in the world in 2017. So something that was really nice and interesting. Well, Core Drive 6 is scarcity and impatience. So this is basically saying that we want something simply because we can't have it, or it's very difficult to obtain. So this is something that Facebook heavily utilized at the very beginning. So Facebook at the beginning says, oh, we're only for Harvard University. If you didn't go to Harvard, you're too bad, you can't use Facebook. And then it says, well, we're for Harvard, some Ivy League schools, and some other universities that your high school buddies got in, but you were not smart enough to get in. It's too bad. And then it opened to more and more schools. So when it opened up to UCLA, when I was attending it in 2004, everyone rushed into Facebook, not because they already knew how great Facebook was. It's just that, that exclusivity alone made them want to join. So it's like, you're not allowed to come in. Okay, now you're allowed to come in. And everyone rushed in just because of that scarcity component. And this connects to another case study of ours called the Bit Degree. So this is about also about online learning. So I guess similar to Octalysis Prime. As most of you might know, a lot of times the completion rate for online courses is very low. So even if people paid for the course, right? So they believe in the value enough to pay for it, motivation tends to be not very strong, and it's usually is between 3 to 10% of the students who actually complete the course. So we designed a little game, or not a game, but a gamified environment, very different, that says, hey, you're in this cyberpunk future, and there's a very cool city, but you start off in one of the districts, right? So immediately there's that scarcity of, oh, there's other places you can't go to, you don't know what's like. And so as you complete your courses, then you unlock new districts and you can go to more places. So instead of saying, oh, I'm just going to take 1 or 2 classes, see how it goes, like, wow, I got to take my classes to get to the next zone. So you feel like there's places you can't go to yet. You place a limit on something, you create desire. And there's a chest you can only open daily, and there's a streak design. So there's a few more scarcity components for people to want to push. And they did an A/B testing for this experience. So they sent half the traffic to their normal site and half the traffic to their gamified site. And they saw that course completions went from 10% to 45%, so more than 3x that. Time on platform increased also by 300%, and course completion time was reduced by half. So again, a lot more students completed the courses, and they did it in half the time compared to usual. So they were quite happy. I think we did this project 45 years ago, but even today they're still on social media talking about how we help them a lot, and it's very useful. Another aspect of this is so this is a bank, right? Emirates MBD, and they want to not only have people save money, they also want people to be healthier. So they created a savings account where you have to attach an exercise device to it. And what it is that as you take more steps per day, your interest rate goes up. So if you take less than 3, and this is back in the day, I think interest rates are different now, but if you take less than 3,000 steps every day, your interest rate is like 0.2%. But if you do 10,000 steps every single day, then your interest rate at 3%. So it's basically like protecting your health and your wealth, right? And so now people feel like, okay, now not only do I need to put a lot of money into the account, now I need to work out, like run every day, and that makes me the happiest. So that's a gamified way to get people to save money and to exercise more. Core Drive 7 is unpredictability and curiosity. So this is basically saying, because we don't know what's going to happen next, we're always thinking about it. It's the core drive that is heavily utilized in the gambling industry. And whenever you have like a sweepstakes program, a lottery system, a raffle ticket system, you have this core drive. It's also the drive that makes us want to finish a book or a movie. I think from the academic world, many people are familiar with the Skinner box. And so scientist B.F. Skinner put different animals in a box, pigeon or mouse, and in the box there's a lever. And so the first experiment is that whenever the animal presses the lever, food comes out. And what you'll see is the animal will press the lever until it's no longer hungry because it doesn't need food anymore. Kind of makes sense. But when you switch the design to the point where if the animal presses the lever, food may or may not come out, and sometimes two come out. What you'll see is that the animal will constantly be pressing the lever, regardless if it's hungry or not, because it's just messing with its brain. Will it come out? Will it come out? And there's just like a little bit of gambling addiction in a little Skinner box. Now, in the early days of gamification, some of the critics were saying, hey, when you give people these points and badges, it's like putting them into a Skinner box. But that's actually imprecise if you know the Octalysis framework, because we know that points and badges, if done well, is about core drive 2 development accomplishment. But the unique insight about the Skinner box is not that points or badges or rewards drive obsessive behavior. It's that variable rewards, unpredictable results drive obsessive behavior. And this is embodied in that core drive 7 unpredictability and curiosity, which again is the gambling drive. But of course, curiosity is also makes us want to learn and go through different experiences. And so sometimes people take interesting content and add that curiosity to it. So this Blendtec is a blender company, and they made a YouTube channel called Will It Blend, and they basically put a bunch of different things into a blender, like golf balls, the newest iPhone, the iPad, they have to crunch it up a little bit more. And so people are like, wow, I'm still trying to save up money to buy the most expensive, latest iPhone. And this guy just throws it into a blender. And so obviously from a commercial standpoint, he's trying to demonstrate how powerful his blender is. So as of 2020, they got 285 million views. And, again, most people don't watch it because they want to buy a blender, but when they actually do want to buy one, they're like, hey, wait a second, Blendtec blenders can slice golf balls into dust. So I'm sure my vegetables wouldn't be so bad, right? And then they increase their revenue massively because of that too. This is an interesting case study, which is done by a student of mine in Brazil. So they engaged the second largest public bank in Brazil called Caixa Econômica Federal, and they wanted to get all 83,000 employees to work more with more excitement across 4,500 locations. And through gamification, they want to see if they can increase their recurring income by 5%. So my student Ricardo, they used the Octalysis framework and they pushed through with a platform called Funny Fire. And they had a collection card game design where every time you do your work, you'll randomly have a card like 1/4 of a TV or 1/2 of a coffee maker. And if you get all the parts, you actually get that reward. And so a lot of people are really excited to do work because there's that excitement of constantly drawing new potential rewards. The company saw that, hey, they actually are making a lot of money the more they give out. So they started giving out cars eventually. But over 9 months, they increased their recurring income by, actually with today's dollars, it's 800 million, I believe. But back in the day, it's over $1 billion, basically a 46% lift. And because of that, they actually rose from the #2 public bank in Brazil to the #1 public bank because of this gamification design. So you can see when it's done well, it does create a large impact. And we did a follow-up 3 years later, and it actually became 100% lift from the starting line. And obviously, some people say, well, it might be different other factors, whatnot. But you'll know that if you're the second largest bank in the world, in the country, you don't just change your metrics by 40%, 80% randomly over a year, right? It's not through normal organic means, and it keeps building the next few years. So people, and even the companies say, yeah, it's definitely the gamification project that helped with that. Core drive 8 is loss and avoidance. So you're doing something to avoid a loss. You don't want something bad to happen. It's the fear core drive. And it's just basically, sometimes you just want to avoid changing your behavior. Like, you should do something, but you have this status quo sloth. You're on this behavioral inertia and just keep doing that. And you feel regret after. Or sometimes there's FOMO, fear of missing out. You don't want to fall behind what your friends are doing on social media. That's really well embedded in this design that we call streaks, right? And so Duolingo uses that where you're constantly trying to maintain your streak. And a lot of people might think a streak design is core drive 2 development accomplishment, right? Yay, 10 days in a row, I feel accomplished, 20 days in a row. But inevitably, it goes to become loss and avoidance. Now people are just scared of losing their streak, and they're afraid of going to airplanes, take long trips. And it becomes a bit more stressful. But when you get to a high level, they do give you a really cool badge. This is one of my OP members who said he got this 1,500-day language streak, which is quite impressive. Looks cool too. Okay, so this is the Octalysis framework, and like I said, based on our studies, everything we do is based on one or more of these 8 core drives, which means that if there's none of these 8 core drives there's zero motivation, no behavior happens. But also, like I said, it's graphed in an octagon shape for a reason. The left side, I call them left brain core drives, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's geographically on the left side versus the right side, but it symbolically represents our logical brain versus our right side, right brain core drive symbolically represents our emotional brain. Now, what's interesting about this is that the left brain core drives deal with extrinsic motivation, things you do for a reward, a purpose, or a goal, but you don't necessarily enjoy the activity itself. So once you obtain the reward, you hit your goals or get used to the reward, you stop doing the behavior. If you say, hey, I have this really boring lecture, but if you participate, then you'll get rewards, right? The activity is not more enjoyable, but there's extrinsic motivation attached to it. Whether it's rewards, it's points or badges or money, doesn't matter. It's just they did for the reward, not for the activity. So this is usually good for attracting new people to experience. Then the right brain core drives deal with intrinsic motivation core drives. So These are things we just enjoy doing to the point that we're even willing to spend money just to experience it. So we don't, and even if we lost all our progress the next day, we would still want to do the activity today because that's how we measure our quality of lives, right? How much time we just spend on things we enjoy doing. So we don't need a reward enjoying using our creativity. We don't need a reward enjoy hanging out with our friends, right? A lot of people hang out with the same friends since middle school for many hours a day, and there's no badge or progress bar or reward or NFTs, right? And people still do it. It's enjoyable. It's evergreen. We also don't need a reward to be in that suspense of unpredictability. So example I give a lot is, let's say you sit there and you press a button for 4 hours straight and you're guaranteed a paycheck. That's kind of boring, right? That's like a job at a factory. Most people don't like that. But if you sit there and you press a button for 4 hours straight, and maybe you'll get a paycheck, maybe you won't, maybe you'll even lose money. Suddenly that's casino gambling. And a lot of people like that, right? And it makes no sense. Same behavior. One, you're guaranteed a payout. And the other one, you're most likely going to lose money because that's how the casino makes so much money. But our brains prefer the latter, the later one, because we're literally paying for that intrinsic excitement of maybe I'll win, maybe I'll win. And so my friends will come out of a casino telling me, hey, Yu-kai, lost $200, but that was so much fun. Let's go back next week, right? So that's, in a sense, intrinsic. So intrinsic motivation is good for keeping people in the system and they want to have fun and stay there and contribute as long as possible. There's also a different dynamic between the top and the bottom. So the top one, we call them white hat motivation core drives. So if you're doing things because you feel like a part of something bigger than yourself, you're accomplishing great things and leveling up, achieving mastery, and using your creativity, feels very, very good. But because you're in full control, you kind of procrastinate. There's no urgency to it. And the bottom ones, we call them black hat motivation core drives. So if you're always doing something just to avoid a loss, just because you can't have something, or just because you don't know what's going to happen next, it's still extremely powerful in driving our behavior. But in the long run, it could leave a bad taste in your mouth because you feel like you're not in control of your own behavior and you could want to actually drop out. So again, white hat makes people feel powerful, in control, they feel good, but there's no sense of urgency. So, so they procrastinate. And often it's good for things like community management, innovative workplaces, classroom environments, loyalty programs. Whereas black hat motivation makes people feel urgent, obsessed, even addicted. But in the long run, people might feel like they can't control their own behavior and they wanna drop out. So it's good for one-time transactions. You just want people to give you their credit card, donate money, or short burst of activities like a 2-week competition in your company, because that's thrilling. But if you have a year-long competition, then it's demoralizing, because most people don't want to be in a constant state of competing with their coworkers. So they're used for different kind of applications. And one of the trends that is a little dangerous is, it's obviously good, but it's dangerous, is data-driven design. And it's pioneered by Zynga, right? So they say, hey, we don't know what the answer is, but we just look at the data, and whatever the data says, we're going to do more of that. Now, the problem is because black hat motivation drives urgency, right? If you look at too closely at the data, you're always going to do more black hat because you do a torture break or whatnot, or you say, oh, we'll punish people for it, and people immediately change your behavior and like, wow, this is so effective. According to the data, let's just keep doing that. And the experience gets more and more and more black hat. But when you have things like epic median calling and using your creativity, you don't always see immediate results and change of behavior. It's a long-term cultural improvement, but the data might not show at the beginning. So that's important to have that understanding. Even if the data shows people are changing their behavior, they might not be happy, they might not be thriving because of it, they might feel demoralized. So that's an important thing. But black hat motivation isn't a bad thing per se. A lot of people want themselves to be in black hat motivation in order to go to the gym more often or eat more healthily. So this is a kind of funny example where it's an alarm clock where every time you press the snooze button, the wake me up later button, it destroys your money. So you're waking up because of loss and avoidance, right? You don't want to lose money, so you get up. But you're okay about it, even though you don't feel comfortable, right? You're okay because it's a goal you want to accomplish. You want to wake up. What people don't like is when marketers, employers, governments, educators, parents use a lot of this black hat motivation in order to get people to buy things they don't need, or work overtime without proper compensation and get manipulated. And a lot of people still do the behavior because this stuff is obsessive, but the moment they can escape, they will from that environment. And sometimes even children run away from home when their parenting strategy is too black hat. But if it's something you actually want to do, you just don't have that drive to push through, then you want it. So that's why some people pay their gym trainers to call them losers, right? You're doing push-ups and like, oh, you're so weak, you're so weak. And then, depending on your gym trainer's style, but later you thank them. Hey, thank you for pushing me so hard, harder than I could ever push myself, and I achieved my goals. So you thank them for giving you this black hat experience. Yeah, so anyway, this is the Octalysis framework. And once we know how people feel within, then you can think about what are the game design techniques that could bring that out, because you could have badges, but people don't feel accomplished. You could have group quest designs, but people don't feel socially connected. You could have Easter eggs, but people don't feel a sense of unpredictability. So the key is that the game design techniques are not as important as our psychological core drives. Things are successful when the core drives are there, and these different game design techniques are only there to bring it out. So the next few slides I'm going to go through very, very quickly, just to get a feel of where this can go with this core drive, the versatility of it. But obviously, because I want to make sure we have some more question time, I'm not going to spend detail going through that. But once you have the framework, you can start to use to analyze different experiences. Like LinkedIn is very left brain core drives, not right brain core drive. It's about your career, right? Extrinsic results. And so people create an account. You can see that in banking, that it has different core drives, or education, Classcraft, a very good gamified platform. Facebook lacks epic meaning and calling. So I have a website that allows people to manipulate the shapes and give templating insights, yukaicchou.com/octalysis-tool. But then you can also track the user journey with the Octalysis framework. You can see how different core drives motivate different people in different stages of the journey, right? Discovery phase, why do they even try out this thing? Onboarding, your day one experience, what core drives motivate you? Scaffolding, coming back every day, every week, every month, or 10 times a day, whatever your design is. And the end game, which is how do you retain your veterans to come back still every day for 10 years, after 15 years. And remember, if there's no blue area, there's zero motivation, right? They just drop out. They don't even go to the next phase. And then we can start using it to understand different player types, how different types of people are motivated differently. Here I have Richard Bardo's 4 player types: achievers, explorers, socialists, and killers. So, basically just saying different types of people are motivated differently, so we can kind of track what core drives motivate different people at different stages. Now, another interesting topic that I will want to quickly flash through, because some people might have that question about, okay, but how does that connect to the other motivation frameworks and behavioral models out there? Since you guys are, many of you in the educational world, you might be familiar with some of that. So again, don't have time to go through the details of these, but the key is that when you look at something, for instance, like the self-determination theory by Ryan and Daichi, it talks about purpose, competence, autonomy, and relatedness, which are really about the white hat motivation core drives, right? So we through that, we kind of understand, okay, this framework is about getting people to do creative work in the long term, but it doesn't necessarily need to, for instance, explain why people are addicted to gambling or threats or whatnot, right? So this is a white hat motivation core drive kind of framework. I'm not saying that, the Octalysis, it has more insights than it. I'm saying that this actually increases our understanding of these core drives. So I've studied a lot of them, and I said, okay, now I understand these core drives more. So it's very valuable. This is the 4 keys to fun. This is actually a bit too complex. I'm not going to go into detail if you don't already know this. We talked about Richard Bardo's 4 player types. So you can act on the world, interact on the world with the world, act on players, or interact with players. And we can see that different player types might have different core drive profiles that, different core drives motivate them a bit more. This one, I think majority of people know this. I think everyone kind of knows this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we can actually track different core drives to different needs. And what's interesting is that we'll also see that core drives 1, 2, and 3 on the top, 4 and 5 are in the middle, 6, 7, 8 on the bottom. So we can almost overlay Octalysis on top of that, which is like bottom is black hat, top is white hat. And there's a reason for the bottom is more of our crocodile survival instincts, right? So we feel like the reason why we feel out of control is because we feel like we're like hardwired to respond to stimuli that way. right, deal with safety or scarce resources or explore new lands. And whereas the top ones are more of our neocortex, like what does it mean to be human? Do I love music and stuff? So it's there's a reason, we're all talking about the same brain, so there's a reason why it all converges together. You can look at flow theory with Yu-kai Chou unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and we can see how different core drives put them on a different place on this challenge versus skills chart about core drive loss and avoidance increases the challenge and difficulty, and it leads more to anxiety. And then social influence and other core drives, which is like collecting, it's a little bit easier, so lower on the challenge scale, but potentially lead to boredom. So the key is to stay in the middle and reach your flow channel. Then we can see it with behavioral economics, with Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman. You can see it's very transactional, right? Because economics, it's transactional. So left brain is black hat because it has immediate results, but it rarely talks about, for instance, why people would give up their lives for a higher vision, or even they'll do something just because it's creatively fun, right? And then we have Robert Cialdini's influence. So yeah, so there's a lot of ways to study all of this. So anyways, would love to open up for questions. I have some other things that I could be showing, but I think since we're 2 minutes into the hour, we're out 1 hour, 2 minutes into the talk, I'd like to see if people want to ask questions so we can discuss that.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chou, for sharing your Octalysis framework and get us through all the 8 core drives. And it's really inspiring. And I especially like all the examples that you gave in business and education sectors, which was something new compared to the book that you have. So it's really good to know it from your sharing today. And I believe that we also have some questions from our audiences. So if you want to ask some questions, feel free to unmute yourself to ask directly, or you can put your questions in our chat box. And during the time that we are waiting for more questions coming, we can take a look of the burning questions that we asked earlier. And we got one question from Christian, which got many thumbs and heart. And he asked about how to make gamification feel less just like points, badges, and leaderboards. So I think the stuff that you have mentioned, we're already addressing that. Do you want to say something more about it?
Yeah, I think obviously if you're paying attention to the presentation, I think you'll feel at least a lot of it is answered. But yeah, I think that's a misconception where we talk about, there's a lot of people who think gamification is just applying points and badges, but that it's actually just a small part of the 8 core drives, right? It's only core drive 2, and it's not just core drive 2, because core drive 2 development content has a variety of different game design techniques too. But points and badges, the reason why it's so popular is because it's kind of easy, a little bit brainless, like you just slap on some points. So you say, hey, before you did things, and they're not bad mechanics. They actually are useful if you do it correctly. I think it's just overly used. It's just like the thing about a screwdriver is useful, but if you use a screwdriver for everything you see, then you'll find the screwdriver is not the best tool. But it's useful because it gives people feedback, right? About, hey, you're progressing and you are and you're achieving something. But you'll see that again, this is on the left top, right? Development accomplishment, which means it's a white hat extrinsic motivation core drive, which means that as long as we're feeling we're progressing and we are achieving new heights, we feel engaged. But it's extrinsic, so it's results oriented, right? So the moment we feel like we plateaued, we're no longer making that much progress, then we stop being motivated. So a lot of exercise apps have this problem, right? You're like running. It says, hey, you're running faster now. You got an extra mile than before, and people feel good. But at one point they feel like, hey, I'm not improving as quickly anymore. And so they just kind of feel like it's not driven. But if you look at, for instance, the other angle, the other opposite end, which is core drive 7, unpredictability and curiosity. So this is a right brain black hat motivation core drive, right? So which means our brains enjoy the activity, but we feel out of control. So this is, for instance, you want to go to bed at 10 p.m., but you end up binge watching Netflix till 3 in the morning. Okay, right? So your brain enjoyed it, but you feel out of control. So even though it's intrinsically enjoyable, you feel a little bit guilty, like, oh, what, kind of like gambling addiction, which is also the same core drive. So that people need to kind of have a left brain justification, like, oh, at least I finished season 2, right? I had some extrinsic results, or at least I learned about how medieval politics, compare with each other, or something like that. So we still just, if you just have intrinsic, people enjoy it, but some afterwards they might feel a little guilty. So that's why the left. So the key is that not any one of these core drive is better or worse than each other. It's about using the right core drive at the right time and having that balance. This is the most important thing about the Octalysis framework.
Yeah, thank you. I think I can really relate to the Netflix scenario, and I think others can too. Christian, so what are your thoughts? What's on your mind about your burning question? Do you want to share something?
And no, basically, I was just this is something that I normally hear a lot, that we just apply some point system. This is kind of the first idea normally people get, and I just was curious what you would answer in this let's say basic mechanics that's often used. And I completely agree with your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, even if you're just applying some point system, I would recommend adding a bit more right brain core drives to it. So again, just from our research, the right brain core drives is what fun derives from. So if you don't have these core drive 3, 5, 7, people will still do things because it's important or it makes money or whatnot, but they don't do it because it's fun anymore. So the key is that even with a point system, you can say, how do we give people more meaningful choice and self-expression, right? So maybe there's more strategy to give the points, not linear. Everyone does the exact same thing and they get the points, but there's different ways to get there. There's short, high risk, high reward strategies, low risk, low reward, or people want to save up for a big reward or use a short, get the quick small reward, quick wins. So there's some more strategy. Also, sometimes more self-expression. So it's like your points can convert into different styles of play. It's not just a linear, like, oh, you become silver and gold, but it's like you can branch into different directions so you can express yourself more in the system. Again, everything is more intrinsically enjoyable when it's social. So social influence is in the middle, right? So it could be white hat or black hat, depending on how you design for it. So white hat would be more like collaboration, social appreciation. Black hat would be more competition and peer pressure. And it's oftentimes we found the best of both worlds to be like a team competition, because not everyone wants to be very competitive, but no one wants to drag their team down. So it has that both like long-term, hey, I feel good working with my teammates, but there's also a bit of a thrill, excitement of competing with others. So again, back to the points and badges, it could be, hey, group efforts give you, group points or group achievements. Or when you get some kind of achievement, it becomes what we call a social treasure, which means, you have to give it to other people as an appreciation token, right? And so now you're getting points, but what does it mean if you have 1,000,000 points? It's not because you just click the button 1,000,000 times. It's because 1,000 of your peers actually really appreciate what you did. It feels obviously very different, right? And then unpredictability and curiosity, you can also have first of a bit more mystery box, Easter eggs, some delightful, surprising elements to gain points, or sometimes some of the badges are Easter eggs. So they don't even know that it happened, but they did something and boom, it just happened. And because it's unexpected, creates the most amount of delight. So again, even with a simple points and badges structure, you can make it more sophisticated or enjoyable through adding different core drives. And without, I think the mistake a lot of companies make and organizations and potential educators, they really like to focus on the left brain core drives, which is basically saying, hey, I want to see this activity increase more, so let me give them a reward because of it, like give them good grade, give them a certificate, give them money, give them NFTs. But this is almost like saying, hey, a game designer saying, I'm going to create a really boring game, and if you play this boring game 1,000 times, you'll get rewards, right? It doesn't make any sense. it's better to say, I'm going to be creating a really fun game that's exciting to play and has these 3 core drive elements on the right. And then as you play this fun game 1,000 times, you play very well, you will get rewards and status and access and power and all that stuff. That makes way more sense from a game design standpoint, and also equally to a gamification or motivation design standpoint.
Thanks, I love that. Yeah, and then we have the next question from Ifan. Would you like to say something about your question?
Yeah, it was just a general question really about how we can incorporate this into general learning. Obviously my area is from higher education, as most people's are, and how we can incorporate elements of gamification into other traditional teaching to engage with different audiences, really, to create an impact.
Yeah, so generally speaking, we have a 5-step design process to use the framework to solve problems. But again, it's a bit out of the time scope of this presentation, but the short form way of using this framework to any application is to define desired actions, right? So we want our students, that's the player type, to do more of this activity, right? And whatever that is, show up to lectures every day, or retain as much knowledge after 6 months, or whatever that desired behavior is. Once you define it, then you kind of go around the 8 core drives and say, okay, what core drives already motivate them to do it? Because again, if there's none, they don't do it. But then you brainstorm around and say, okay, how do we add more epic meaning and calling into, and so basically meaning and purpose into this experience? How do we make them feel more accomplished and driven and having progression? How do you give them more autonomy? So you just kind of go through this 8 core drives and you start brainstorming different ideas so that desired behavior increases in probability. And one interesting example I have actually for epic meaning and calling is when I was in college, again, UCLA, I studied international economics, but I enrolled in this class, physiological science 5. So that's basically health class. And I took it. The motivation for me to take it is I heard that the professor gave really easy A's. Okay. So, and I was already being an entrepreneur, so I didn't want to do so much work at school. So I wanted easy. So I went there because of Core Drive 2 development accomplished. I just wanted a badge, basically, easy badge, an A. But then the first lecture, the first thing the professor said to a class of, I think, 400 students was that he said, this is going to be the most important class you take at UCLA. And everyone's like, what is he talking about, right? Like, this is not even my major. So there's suddenly this Core Drive 7, unpredictable curiosity. Everyone's like, what is he talking about? And he says, because nothing is as important as your health. And since this is not even your major, just the elective, this is going to be the only class you take at UCLA that protects your health. And so you should pay attention to what we're going to learn today. And then suddenly he shifted. Everyone's like, oh, right, this is an important class, right? And I can say this happened in, I think, 2005. And so even last week, I've made eating decisions based on what I learned in that class from 19 years ago, because I didn't do it for the A anymore, because that would have just been a quarter of extrinsic motivation. I did it for the purpose and the goal for it. So that's just I don't know if how intentionally he was thinking about motivation, but it's just adding like, hey, there's a higher purpose and meaning for what you're learning here, not just getting an A. And I think this is a big problem in education. Most kids don't even know why they're learning things besides getting grades. So I had a client, he had a son who was graduating high school, but he was kind of an overachiever, like 2 years ahead of his age. And he could tell me, all like, oh, Harvard is good at these things, but bad at these things. Stanford's good at this and bad at that. And then I don't know why, but I just randomly brought up the topic that, math is useful. And then suddenly he went from, oh, you're a cool gamification guy, to, come on, Yu-kai, like, when do you ever use like advanced math after you graduate school? And then I'm like, oh yeah. No, I'm serious. Like, if you want to be a scientist, you got to use a lot of math. And he says, really? I'm like, yeah. Howard's going to tell the president that the meteor is going to strike the Earth in like exactly 29 days at 4 minutes, right? And I said, if you want to be a economist, you got to use math. If you want to be an accountant, you got to use math. And he's like, that makes a lot of sense. I've never thought about that before. So this is a kid who's doing everything he's supposed to be doing, right? He's getting all A's, he's doing well in his SAT exams. He's like researching all his college things, but he has no ideas why he's learning math. And so I think that's a big problem in a lot of the education system, which is people just don't know why they're learning this and how it can actually make an impact in the world. So that's just epic meaning and calling. But we talked about just like blend tech, right? You make looking at a blender more fun. I think the course material could have a lot more delightful surprises and elements and whatnot. And you'll see some educators, they do have a passion in what they're teaching. They want to make it interesting. They put effort into it. I have unfortunately experienced probably more often than not professors who are there just because they want to do research work and they're just required to teach undergrad students. And so they just like to read from their PowerPoint, and every student's falling asleep because like, we can read it faster than you. So why are you just reading it to us? Right. And so it's good to have dynamic content, right? Example, some high school teachers do this better where when they're teaching them, they'll just like, oh, for instance, Justin Bieber did this, walks down the street and sees this can floating in the air, and he's thinking about the physics of it. Everyone, and it's like, oh, Justin Bieber, what is he talking about, right? As opposed to just some abstract concept. I think, and this goes without saying, but I think it's one of the most underused things. Core Drive 5 social influence relatedness. To be honest, it's really people who feel like their educators care about them make the biggest difference. I've known plenty of people who told me that they chose their majors because they had a high school teacher that cared about them. Like, oh, I'm a chemist because in high school my high school teacher really cared about me. It's like, well, you were like almost perfect at math, It's like, yeah, math is just something I was good at. Doesn't mean I was going to major at it. So when a teacher actually shows care and concern for their student, they're so inspired, they just want to dedicate their whole lives to what that teacher is teaching, regardless how good are they at the subject. But it's like everyone kind of knows that, but I don't think enough educators express that care. Even if they do care, they don't express it enough. And so I think, especially with how prominent information is out there these days, like everyone can just find knowledge online and at their fingertips and through AI. I think the educator is really there as a emotional support, like a cheerleader, like guy, giving them context, like why, when, again, the why, right? When do you use this knowledge? How do you solve problems with it and be confident with yourself? I think that's important. Just like that movie, Good Will Hunting, with Matt Damon and suddenly forgot the other guy's name. But Matt Damon's character, he was already a genius. And so he was arrogant, but he needed a emotional educator that guided his emotional journey, right? That's why the community college teacher actually was a better educator for him than the mathematician who was winning many awards, because he felt lost inside with his talent. And so I think, again, that's just a few core drives, and we can just continue to think, okay, how do we get students to use more creativity, be more hands-on? So once you go through those 8 core drives, you'll come up with some action items, some things that we could do. It doesn't have to be these game design techniques. It could just be, again, the core of gamification, just making things more engaging, more motivating. Like I said, human focus design, not function focus, right? A lot of similar to the factory example I said, a lot of educators are function focused. They assume students will show up to class, study, and learn, right? But as we know, a lot of students don't do that. So how do we make it more human focused, where you optimize not just for knowledge and course material, but motivation, and have a little bit of scarcity. At the end of every lecture, there's something that you give them a mystery. You give them some information, say, hey, you'll find out in the beginning of the next lecture, so people are thinking about it throughout. Even the Netflix dramas does that all the time with the cliffhangers, right? So they release 1 episode a week, not even Netflix, TV dramas, and then for the whole week, everyone's talking about it. It's like, oh, what do you think? What do you think is the answer? Who's the killer or whatnot, right? So the entertainment industry knows they they have to do it, because if they don't do it, there's no reason to engage. Everyone leaves, right? In the education world, or like I said, banking world, even if it's not motivating, people know that I have to go to class, I have to graduate school, I have to, manage my money. So even if every step of the way is full of agony, they just have to do it. But obviously there's a lot to gain if you learn from the entertainment world, because they're in this brutal world of slaughter. Like if you're not the most fun thing every moment, then people just throw you away. And if those essential industries learn from that, I think it's going to be a win-win, where it's essential, it's important, but it's at the same time enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then we have another question before we covering the other follow-up questions. That's from Bob. Do you want to explain something about your question?
Yeah, hello.
Oh.
I had a question how to implement gamification in team learning, and I was just thinking about it. What's the problem with that? It's the problem we face is that in a lot of things we do, there is a bit of self-reflection, and I was wondering, how can I use the Octalysis diagram to get more intrinsic motivation for people to reflect on their own actions, and because that's pretty hard if you have a team and you want them to do that, if you're not there, if they're playing actually a game.
Okay, so the question is, how do we get people to reflect on their own actions after engaging with an activity?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, and can I use the diagram for that? And
Yeah. So again, so I mentioned the 5-step process. So this is the 5-step, strategy dashboard, brainstorming. I mean, this doesn't make sense out of context, but the first step is about the strategy dashboard. So I'll just flash it here. But it's the same structure, right? Usually, because our projects are all over the place. My projects are, how do you motivate the largest steel manufacturer, the workers in the largest steel manufacturer in the world to do their jobs in a safer manner in the factory, right? Or how to get senior citizens to take their pills more, or how to get kindergartens in China to eat more healthily and understand the environmental impact of their food, and how to get 100 million billionaires to crowdfund meaningful projects. So it's all over the place, and there's no possible way that I can be an expert in any one of these fields. But I can be an expert in how to motivate the brain, right? So as long as people come to me and they can define that structure, they can tell me what they're trying to improve, business metrics, who are they targeting, what are the desired actions, like what do we actually want them to do, what are the feedback mechanics. So these are the ways we can reach them to trigger desired action through those 8 core drives, right? So sometimes you can only reach them via email or face-to-face or a mobile app or a pamphlet, who knows? These are all feedback mechanic vehicles. And then we can deliver those 8 core drives through that to trigger desired actions. When they do it, they reach a win state, and we have rewards embedded, and those are physical, emotional rewards. We have an acronym called SAPS, Status, Access, Power, Stuff. And so for every problem, we just go back to that, right? And so you've defined, like, okay, after the activity, so they've already done a bunch of things, and the desired action is to reflect on how they do it, and I guess try to improve on it, self-reflection, whatnot. So then the idea is, okay, here just on this structure, it's like, okay, if they first of all, what are the triggers to get them to even consider that, right? So the Stanford professor talks about, BJ Fogg talks about behavior equals motivation, ability, and a prompt. He's called a trigger. So it's like, you need the motivation to want to do something. You need the ability to do something, which means it's like requires less brain cycle, less clicks, less money. And then you need a prompt, and the prompt, here we call the triggers, is one of the most important things, because if there's no prompt to even remind the person to even consider it, then there is no behavior. Like let's say you're running out of gas driving on the road. So you have a lot of motivation to get gas, right? You don't want to get stuck on the road. And if you are doing okay financially, you have the ability to get gas. But maybe you don't have a prompt because you didn't see the gas light turn on. So you never even considered this behavior. And as a result, you get stuck on the road, a very undesirable situation. So the first thing to tackle what you brought out, again, it's actually a complex thing to answer in a few minutes, but you first want to think about what are ways you can reach this audience, because I'm not very sure about that yet. And so after the activity, is it a software thing pop up? Is it a coach that can say, hey, now do this, right? Blah, blah, blah. So if you want to think about what are the ways you can reach them, there must be a trigger for them to consider evaluating what they just did. And then along with that trigger are those 8 core drives, right? So is the trigger about, hey, you're going to do this again next time, and if you improve next time, there is there is some kind of reward. So left brain core drives, you'll as you improve, you will again, they have to know why they're doing this activity in the first place, right? What does it mean to do very well? Are they going to do better in life? Are they going to solve the world's problems? Are they going to make their parents proud or make themselves confident? I think a lot of people lack self-esteem these days, but it has to. So what is that message there? Or hey, every time you there's a collection set design or whatnot, so it's like different theme based, 4 seasons, whatnot. Or most of the time, if it's a hands-on engagement, social influence, it's like your coach is telling you to do it and he's repeatedly nudging you. So there's multiple trigger points with some social influence, and then there's social norming. Hey, 60% of the students have already done it, and you're one of the 40 that hasn't done it yet. So those tend to drive some motivation too. Sometimes you can do unpredictability. Hey, the people who do a self-reflection or review, assuming you can see them do it, or they have to submit it, we'll go through like a spinning wheel or a dice roll, and the dice roll will result in something. Again, back to this, right? Win state rewards. So they might get more status or access or power or stuff. And so again, in a few minutes, I won't be able to solve everyone's problem, but that's why I'm teaching a methodology to say how we tackle these situations, right? We see the player, we see the desired action, we go through the 8 core drives, and we start adding these ideas to get people to do that behavior. So hopefully this direction helps you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the wonderful questions and the answers from Yu-kai in a limited time. And yes, we are reaching to the end of our Zoom meeting. We have 2 other questions, but I think we don't really have time to answer each of that. Yeah, great. Thank you. That's my next question, how to contact with you if some of our audiences want to reach you and ask questions and seek collaborations.
Yeah, the best way is through a new service that one of my teams launched called hitmeup.ai. So because I get way too many emails from readers and all this, so I miss a lot of them. So what this is that if you go to hitmeup.ai/Yu-kai, there's a bot that I've trained that will just say, hey, what do you need? And some people say, hey, I'd like to have a speech with Yu-kai. So it'll say, all right, what time? Is this paid or not? But if you just ask questions about how does the 8 core drives work, how do I improve education with it, it will give you, again, as good as an AI can do, some answer. But I will read through all of them myself. So don't feel like this is just talking to an AI. I'll read through all of them, and then I will respond to them and say, hey, but of course, it's easier if I respond to questions that I can answer in a few sentences. If it's like I need a whole essay, then I will probably want to do it, but I'll procrastinate for 9 months and then forget about it. But yeah, feel free to reach me there. I'm on Twitter at Yu-kai Chou too, or x.com, and my website is yukaicchou.com.
Thank you. Thank you a lot for the wonderful presentation and all the insights that you have provided to us today. Thank you so much. And thank for everyone who is joining us on a Friday evening. And I wish you a very good, nice weekend. And good night to Yu-kai from your side.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.